if a circumstance happens where you feel, let's say, angry, I always refer to angry because it's the emotion that I'm most familiar with. It's the emotion that I can most easily express because I'm a very passionate person. I often joke and say, I love loudly and passionately, and I also hate loudly and passionately. And my emotions bounce from one end to the other quite freely. And I'm okay with that because that's just part and parcel of who I am. I've worked through that and I've got acceptance of that now. But let's say something happens where I'm triggered to feel angry. My unconscious mind goes, oops, Bree's angry again. We need to validate that. We need to prove that she has um, the right to feel angry in that instance. So even though this situation has happened and that's caused her to feel angry, my unconscious mind goes, yeah, but remember when this happened and this happened and this happened way back in 1997 when this happened as well. And that's why we get stuck into that vortex of emotional thinking, because our unconscious mind starts to remind us of all of the reasons why we have the right to feel what we feel at that point in time. And that's because of our limbic system. So while men do that as well, they don't do it to the depth because their limbic system is smaller, which means they process for the moment and then they have an easier time of letting go. Our limbic system doesn't allow us to do that quite so much because it's so deep with emotion, and every emotion is connected to a million different life events that have occurred to us. We're just more mindful of the things that are happening right here, right now, the big stuff, right? So that's the emotional brain. Now, just for information's sake, the newest brain is the logical brain, the rational brain, the thinking brain. Okay, that brain is the newest brain in the human brain. And for women in particular, because our limbic system is so big, the emotional brain, because it is so big, when we get emotional, doesn't matter what kind of emotion it is, the emotional part of our brain fires up. And so that's where all the memories start to come back. It's where all of the examples of why we feel what we feel is valid, starts to play out. And when that emotional brain starts to light up, the thinking brain, which is here, shuts down. So this is why, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I'm going to bet you've probably had an experience, my fringe again, you've probably had an experience where you've gotten so emotional that you lose the ability to think straight. Yeah, and you've probably even said that. I just get so caught up in my head that I can't even think. I'm so emotional, I can't even think. And that is what I want to help you with a little bit today. I want to give you the ability to think when your emotions are super, super charged. Now, the caveat to this is number one, this is a temporary fix only. Okay, so a little bit like positive thinking and meditating and breath work and all of those in the moment tools that you can do to try and bring back a sense of calm, they are temporary. They will not heal the deep underlying current of all those emotions because of the unconscious ties that our brain has to the emotions. There's so much I could tell you right now. Um, I'm not going to give you too much information though because I don't want to overwhelm you and I don't want you to think that this is bigger and harder than it needs to be. Okay, so for now, if you can just somewhat understand that your emotions, when you get caught up in an emotional event that then triggers a whole heap of emotional thinking, you're not doing it consciously to start with. You're doing it because your unconscious mind is being driven by your emotional brain, which is chock a block full of that emotional shit that you're dealing with right at that point in time. And the more you stay in that emotional state, essentially the dumber you're going to become because your reasoning brain, your logical brain is going to close down. Okay? In order for us to get out of that cycle, we have to have the conscious awareness and then choice to break that pattern. And that's when it gets tricky because, like I said, our conscious brain only controls somewhere between 3 and 5% of everything that happens to us every single day. Now, to put this into context, if you were to imagine this black wall that's behind you, okay, if you were to imagine one tiny little dot, one teeny tiny little dot all the way here, okay, where my finger is. If you were to imagine that teeny tiny dot represents the conscious thoughts that you have in a day. One teeny tiny little dot out of that entire black wall that's behind me. That's what you're aware of, while the unconscious mind takes control of all of the rest of the blackness in your life. It controls your breathing, it controls your hormones, your endocrine system, your digestive system, your immune system. It controls all of those automatic actions that you're not aware of. And it has somewhere upwards of, I think, and don't quote me exactly on this, but I think it's somewhere around 97,000 thoughts every single day, and you're aware of just 3 to 5% of those thoughts. That's how big your unconscious mind is. That's how complex and masterful and amazing your unconscious mind is.